Good evening, everybody. Hope your Thursday's gone very, very well. This is the EFL Debate League 2 podcast, and we're discussing the bottom two in League 2 this evening. We're joined by Dan from Gandermonium on Sutton United a little later in the podcast, but for now we're joined by Josh Evans from Gloucestershire Live, who commentates on Forest Green Rovers. Josh, it's I suppose not been the best season to cover Forest Green Rovers, is it? Because it's been a tricky couple of years really since that title win in League 2. But a bit of positivity. A bit of positivity recently with the impact of Steve Cotterill.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve's come in and had a real impact. I think the talk that you get from around the club and people in and around it is that he's had a bounce. He's had some sort of impact with the club. A big win on Tuesday as well, really unexpected. And I don't think many fans went with too much expectation to get anything from it against a good Barrow side. But just something like that might just galvanise the fans, might think that there is the great escape that can be on under Cotterill.
I don't know if you saw the post-match scenes, Josh, but I loved the way that Steve Cotterill got everyone together, lifting their hands, and then the way he went over to the fans. There was a couple of fans at the back that he sort of beckoned over, and it's like, even if they're only. And by the way, I'm totally not judging Forest Green fans for having a small away attendance for a Tuesday night at Barrow. That'd be mental. But it's like, even if there's a small number of you, I'm going to bring you all together. And I love that sort of mentality. And it feels, I feel like Troy Deeney wasn't quite able to send that message, whereas I think Steve Cotterill, with his experience and his passion, he seems to have done that.
Yeah, I think so. I think also anything to get that edge, that couple of 1%. That might just be the difference. Sometimes it is just going over to the fans and really appreciating what is a real tough journey on a Tuesday night as well. But don't begrudge anybody for not going and instead watching it at home. So yeah, fair play to the fans who travelled. They really deserved it, to be honest. I thought it was a real credit to them who went. Maybe not with the expectation, but they were given a really good reward, and delighted for them, to be honest. They've been through a lot of tough times over the past couple of years, not much form. So it was a good moment, and just hoping that can just lead to something. I think Cotterill will be exactly the same. He said after the game, felt the pain of the dressing room. And that's also probably in the dressing room, kind of, even at home to Mansfield, they were 1-0 down, having played really well in the first half, but maybe just the mental attitude of playing against a good side and we're still not winning. It might be a case of at some point they'll score a couple of goals, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, they scored 9 on Tuesday, so they're not in the bad form themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It puts a slightly different slant on it, I suppose. But I think it was Phil, who's a director at Forest Green, actually tweeted and said it probably flattered Mansfield a little bit, and that Forest Green shouldn't be too disheartened by the scoreline because the performance was so competitive against what we have to respect as a top side in this division. What have been the real positives of Steve Cotterill's reign so far in terms of maybe individual player performances?
I think overall he just wants to make things positive. He wants to take away whatever's happened before. It's about what is going on between now and the end of the season. I think you can understand that sort of point of view. It's been a tough season, hasn't it? A lot of change in a number of areas, and I mean the managerial position is a little strange as well. I think coming in on an emergency loan, Vicente Reyes played really well on Tuesday night. Really, really mature performance for his age. Maybe not going to be someone who's going to stick around forever, but real positive to get someone who's come in, literally met the players on the coach to go up to Barrow on the Monday, and he was straight into the team on Tuesday. So fair play to him. And Richard Keogh coming in is going to be quite an important sign, it seems. Just that communication between the back line. He's changed the system a little bit, gone to 3 at the back. So maybe it just offers that a bit more insurance at the back, and somebody who's, let's say he's 37 years of age, so he's not going to have the pace that he once had, but the nous on the pitch and the concentration at real key moments, he's gonna go and get his head on things, and also drag players with him.
Certainly will. Delighted to bring in my co-host for the night, Ed Walker.
Sorry, completely lost track of the time. I don't do Thursdays normally. Sorry.
No worries at all. I see you're sporting a Leverkusen top. Anyone who's top the league, bit of a glory hunter. You know,
it's Europa League night, so you're getting in touch with the eventual winners. You know.
Okay, fair enough.
That's the theory.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you know? I think we'll put on hold the talk about the specifics of Forest Green, and we'll come back to that in a few moments. But Ed, I want to come to you with a bit of a big picture conversation about League Two generally, and the two teams at the bottom. Do you think they've got a sniff of staying up?
A sniff, yeah. I do believe that. It's. I think I put this out about a month ago on a tweet on Twitter. I'm quite conflicted on the situation down the bottom.
Tweet on Twitter.
Tweet on, formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, the post. I think you have to call it now, don't you?
You don't put a tweet on something else.
Well, you never know. There might be another one out there that does something like a rip-off somewhere in another country. You never know. Anyway, I put a post out saying I was quite conflicted on the situation. There were quite a number who agreed because you look at the situation. They've been down there for so long. It's always been the two. Occasionally they pick up positive results, but they never felt like the gap was properly closing. But the thing for me is I actually really like both teams. I don't carry a hatred towards either side. Sutton, I'm quite intrigued by this Steve Morison appointment. The big problem for me is I cannot work out what his best team is, and I'm not sure he can either. There's so much different variety that he comes out with every single week. I kind of know that Dean Bazanis is going to play in goal and Joe Kitts is going to be in defence, and that's about all I know. I mean, it might be Harry Smith leading the line, might be Liango leading the line, Craig Eastman, Lakin, Beautyman might be midfield at some point. You're never quite sure he's going to play out wide. So that's my big bugbear with Sutton at the moment, that they can't find a formation, and they are not really getting to run the green either. That was quite painful on Tuesday. Their defeat to Wrexham, for instance, where they actually felt they were quite in it against one of the better teams in the league. So that's a frustration with them. And then Forest Green, I can't wrap my head around how a squad that good is actually where it is. I really can't. The idea to me that a team with Christian Deutsch and Matty Stevens up top, someone like Emmanuel Ozadebe in midfield, Thankati Dabo right wing back, Jordan Moore Taylor, Ryan Innes as your centre back options. The fact that we're just finding them in this situation, the regression they've had in 2 years, really, from being the champions, it felt like they lost an incredibly talented team with an incredibly talented manager 2 years ago. And Dale Vince, in his attempts to try and resurrect them and get things back on track, has just made too many mistakes with managers up to now. But they're sat there now with Steve Cotterill as the boss, who I think is a really high caliber manager, especially for the bottom of League Two, with a good group of players, actually, and a decent window behind them. They just need to start recreating what they did more on Tuesday, because that was a mighty impressive win at Barrow. And if there's more of that, the gap's there. There's teams to catch. Colchester are catchable, Doncaster are catchable. It's just one of these two or both of them getting their act together and stringing a couple of wins together.
Josh, what's your take on how a squad as big as Forest Green have got and players of high pedigree is in this position?
I'm a little bit surprised myself that the calibre of squad, like you said, is in the position they are. But you've got to pick up points, haven't you? I think necessarily the club situation going through such a bad run of form, both last year, kind of had a bit of a hangover into this year. And you hope that Steve Cotterill has the time to change things, because really it's kind of the same appointment in terms of time as when Duncan Ferguson came in last year. He didn't have any sort of impact.
I would say one of the big differences, though, Josh, is Steve Cotterill was actually a manager. I do not rate Duncan Ferguson at all. I didn't at the time. He was someone who'd had a couple of caretaker spells with Everton where he briefly played a few games, and maybe it was just a case of riling up the crowd, riling up the team a bit, getting some positive results out of that. But there was very little prior to his appointment that demonstrated tactical nous. And aside from that Sheffield Wednesday win, I don't think there was much in his spell that really demonstrated either. So I was quite pleased they moved on from him before this new season started. And I had high hopes for the Horsemen. Sadly, that didn't happen. And then Deeney was probably a little bit the same with Ferguson, where you're hiring someone I don't know has that great tactical nous, maybe a better level than Ferguson did. But the big problem for Deeney is his hot-head nature. You just can't say those things in public that he said in his interviews. And that ultimately cost him the job.
Yeah, I do agree in terms of that aspect. I think Deeney actually saw an impact with his actual tactical style. He went very man for man at the top, and when he wanted teams to come at him and play quite attacking, it had quite an impact. They just couldn't really perform to the levels that probably their XG would have probably posted. I think they didn't actually win under Deeney, but you could actually see it quite a change. It's just like you said, the comments that he did make were just you couldn't look past it, to be honest. And I think that was given that
I don't doubt for 1 second he wasn't telling the truth about them. It's just the kind of thing you can't say when you're manager of a football club.
Yeah, it's a real tough situation for. He just probably got to a point where he's not won a game, and he was gathering a little bit of criticism from the fans, and thought it was the right thing to say at the time. But it ended up being his last interview that went pretty big.
I always think with managers, Josh, language is so important. Like, you can sometimes convey messages, but with language that's more that's politically smoother, I think. And that's a mistake a lot of managers make. Sometimes they think I'm just being authentic, and this is just me. But actually, I think when you're in a position of influence, position of leadership, you've got to be careful about how you say things as much as what you say. And I think that's a lesson learned. But great to see Forest Green resurgent under Steve Cotterill. What have you made of Maxi Oyedele, Josh, since signing from Man United?
He hasn't really had too much actual time on the pitch, unfortunately. I think he had a little cameo against Gillingham away, and he looked real bright, to be fair. Good 10, 15 minutes on the pitch, and what was a real good second half performance. And kind of a good team performance that made Oyedele, he came into the pitch and he just had an impact, which is kind of what you want to see. And since then, we haven't really seen a great deal of him. Maybe it's just you don't really want to change too much in terms of your substitutions. I think that's kind of what Cotterill...
And I think when you've got a trio of McAllister, Deutsch and Stevens, you don't really want to break that up. If ideally, you just want to add another one into there rather than take one of them off.
Yeah, it's more about freshening legs up more than anything in that sense. And maybe on Tuesday night, he wasn't the right player to come off the bench, and that's the reason why Cotterill ended up with 6 at the back towards the end. But if Barrow are going to throw the players forward, they got their heads on everything, and that was the key thing.
Certainly was. And talking of getting their heads on things, Richard Keogh looks a great signing. I mean, Ed, do you think he could be a game changer for Forest Green with the experience and leadership qualities?
He will if Jordan Moore-Taylor remains unavailable, because I think Moore-Taylor probably the last 2 seasons is the big frustration with me with Forest Green, where I thought he was wonderful as part of their title-winning team. And for whatever reason, I just don't think he's found the game time to the same level as last 2 years. I think injury's been more of a big part this year. Kind of felt like last year in League One, he just wasn't really wanted. They were just putting people ahead of him. But if Keogh's going to be in the centre of the back three, I think I've seen that Jamie Robson's been playing left side of the back three as well, giving Dominic Thompson that run out at left wing back all by himself, and then joining Ryan Innes in there. There's potential in it, certainly. Keogh's certainly one of the veterans when it comes to EFL football.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, I mean, I want to ask you about Kyle McAllister, because we mentioned earlier, because for me, he's been one of the models of consistency for Forest Green over the last 18 months amid a team that's obviously had its struggles, the collective.
Yeah, I think he's had a real positive... he's probably one player that you can take out of things and go, he's probably getting good figures. I think he's pretty much got... almost half the goal contributions, whether it be goal or assists. So you can say that he can hold his head high in that respect. And he has been that consistent player. I think he got a new contract not too long ago as well. So that kind of the club kind of just rewarding him for probably what has been the most consistent part of his career. I think he didn't necessarily have that at Derby, and I don't think he made a first team appearance, but it was ravaged by injury. Probably Forest Green gave him that opportunity. Another opportunity in English football. So he now that he's staying fit, he owes it to them as well. So he's been one player who you can tell with his technical abilities, he's top drawer, but it's just necessarily going to be getting on those more goals and assists. We want to see more of that. And the moment you get Christian George firing, you're thinking that's probably going to be the avenue to how he's going to get them.
And I'd also say I noticed I was at your game at Colchester a couple of weeks back, which was a great first half and a disastrous about 5 minute spell of the second half, of course, which is alarming at the time, certainly, and something that probably explains why Forest Green are in the situation they're in. But Emmanuel Ozadebi in midfield, his ball carrying ability, that really is a valuable asset, I think, for them to have. And it's kind of weird. There's a lot of players who depart Bradford, to be fair, and actually prove to be all right elsewhere. It just kind of something just doesn't happen to them at Bradford City, sadly. But I think Ozadebi's ball carrying, that really could be a valuable asset alongside Charlie McCann in the middle.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Osadebe is probably the one January signing that's really stood out in terms of maybe didn't get the best of reactions on social media when he first came in.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, well, let's just judge him on the pitch, and his run for the goal on Tuesday night, for example, that was kind of culmination of everything that we've kind of seen so far from him. His ball carrying ability was excellent and just has had an impact in every game that he's played. He's been that also force in midfield that I think Charlie McCann really does kind of get along with and kind of needs alongside him, because he is that technical player who maybe in a 50-50 or in a 60-40 needs that player of some sort of who's going to be aggressive alongside him, who's going to pick up the pieces. And I think together they can, if they can play enough football together this season and stay fit, and then it could be a nice pairing in midfield.
Yeah, I think Charlie McCann clearly has a lot of potential. So really excited to see if he can fulfill it. You've got Harvey Bunker, who's 6'4" and a really tenacious type in midfield, but
or centre back, either one.
Oh, he can play in centre back as well.
It's a bit versatile. Yeah, he played right side the back three for the Colchester game. I know he's done it a couple of times in the past, so he's covering both parts.
Well, I imagine the height sort of lends itself to that. I suppose I could certainly imagine Steve Cotterill taking to him because of the sort of attitude he wants in his players. But obviously it's going to be tough for him, I suppose, with the quality of midfield options that you've got there, Josh.
Yeah, I think so. And I think having him as an option at centre-back is also a pretty good one. I think maybe didn't get the distances right in the Colchester game between him and Dabo. I think that was probably the side that really was a bit of a weak link, and I think it just offered Colchester a way back into the game. At some point, once they got the first, it was the tide was starting to turn. Bunky's still a young man, and I think he's played a lot of football in his short career so far. I think lends himself to being that physical part of the game as well. And one thing that you probably say to him, just be more positive on the ball. Naturally looks quite sideways. So it could be a centre half eventually that look forward, be more progressive on the pitch, and you could probably see more kind of output from him. I think that's probably what a couple of managers might have been kind of just trying to get out of Bunker in the past couple of years, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think then, Josh, that do you think Steve Cotterill, the connections that he's built at Forest Green and the way that he's got fans believing again, do you think that there's a world in which Steve Cotterill actually starts next season as manager, come what may?
I think he believes it to be not just this season. I think there is a genuine thought that he's not just here just to do a job, and if they go down and then it doesn't really matter. But because he's so competitive, that's the be all and end all with him. He's such a winner, and I think that will lend itself to being till the end of the season. I don't think at any point until mathematically down that he will believe that they are a team that will go down, because naturally he wants to win every game. I don't think he'd have come into the situation if he didn't believe that he could get them out of it. So as a person of that sort of mindset, it lends itself to being maybe come what may, he'll be there next year. Be certainly something, whether he stays, if they're in the National League, and then there's every chance that Cotterill will bring them back out of the National League.
Where do we think Forest Green are in terms of the National League? Because we always kind of wonder. You see, a lot of the teams that tend to go down from League Two are really dire financial peril. We've seen it before with clubs like Southend, for instance, or Rochdale or Scunthorpe United when they fell down. It doesn't feel like that really with Forest Green. I think they've just made too many mistakes these last 2 years that's stuck them in this mess. So would you, if you were, for instance, say they didn't pull this off and they did end up dropping down, would you not be feeling kind of confident they could at the very least challenge to an immediate return again?
Yeah, and I think that's also what Cotterill would be really good at. He's been promoted from the National League before. He'll have the mindset to really go and do it again. I think like you said, there's been a few mistakes in a few positions this year in roles, and you think with someone like Cotterill, who is a proper manager, getting people in the correct roles that he sees fit, you feel like a National League should really get out of the National League. And once Chesterfield go up,
we lose the financial juggernauts now, don't we? If we expect Chesterfield to romp to the title, which looks like they're going to do, Wrexham and Notts already gone. I'm not really sure who comes next. Maybe Oldham are the next ones to have a proper go at it. Looks like,
and they could go up by the playoffs this season.
Yeah, they could still, exactly. So it could be a much more open competitive league from top to bottom next time.
Yeah, and I think they'll also have. They're still well backed, aren't they? It's often said about Forest Green that they have got that money pull, but if they just get the right people through the door in roles, you feel like Cotterill will still be able to attract a good calibre of player as well, and that will stand them in good stead whatever league they're in next year.
It does remind me a little bit of, and maybe I was going to say it reminds me a little bit of when Cheltenham appointed Gary Johnson, and you could see there was a bit of an improvement under him, and the club sort of committed to him straight after they'd been relegated, and they got the recruitment spot on the following summer, and I could see something similar happening. But I don't want to look too far ahead, because I also see a genuine possibility of Forest Green beating the drop. So I think they certainly look resurgent. What's Don Bernard's form been like, Josh?
One thing you can say always about Dom is he's going to give everything that he can. He's been there for such a long time now, and he has seemed to get a lot of football over the past 2 years, whether it be through injury, through coming on and replacing players. He just seems to always be there or thereabouts, and fair play to Dom. He takes his opportunities. Maybe hasn't played too much this season in terms of 90 minutes, you'd say. He comes off, he's been on the bench a couple of times lately, and what you do know with Dom, he's going to give you everything, and that's the kind of player that you want around the squad. He's also a real good chap as well, so once you get to know him, real good for the group, and just whether he gets enough football between now and the end of the season will be interesting to see, because like we said about the centre-backs that they've got now, Moore, Taylor, Keogh and Innes, if Moore Taylor is fit when he comes back, you feel like that will be the three to end the season.
Reckon he'll stay up, Josh?
Like you said, resurgent, that win, it's always easier to say you're staying up after a win, but that it's the reaction to how you build it now, isn't it?
It's just simply got to get better at home. Simply got to be better at the new lawn.
Yeah, really form at home is terrible, I think.
9 points at home, Gab.
Yeah, I think it was 10 in 15 League Two games that were all defeats, which is not good. You normally see the team with the worst home record usually get relegated, don't they? Because that's where you need to pick up your points. But at the same time, whether they can pick it up under Cotterill, it's new reign, it's new optimism, and whilst the fans have still got that, there's still a bit of belief there.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully catch you later in the season.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Legend. Cheers, man. Just to respond to Connor's question, we're coming on to Sutton in a moment. We've got Dan from Gandermonium coming on the podcast in about 5 minutes' time. In the meantime, Ed, I wanted to come to a question from Jay Pawley asking about Grimsby. Now, I've got a sort of my own thoughts on this, and then you can kind of come in. I'm actually very confident that Grimsby won't go down. I think they're in a bit of stylistic transition, and obviously there's an inconsistency in performances that comes with that. But I think 3 of the last 6 performances have been significantly encouraging in terms of Accrington Stanley away, where they created by far the better chances, Salford away, where they won 3-0 and deservedly so. And then there was another game, Notts County at home, where they created the better chances. And in that game, and probably others, I think Walsall at home as well, maybe Harrogate, there's been half an hour periods at the beginning of games where you can really see what David Artell's trying to do. And for me, all it takes is one win where they play the way that David Artell wants, and they get that victory. And then I think they'll get a lot of confidence from that. I personally think they're very close to that. I know there's been a few games like Tranmere at home and Stockport at home that haven't gone their way. And
the Walsall game is the one that really comes to mind, the 6-1.
But the first half an hour of that game, they could have been 2 or 3-0 up, Ed. That's the thing. So I appreciate there's defensive issues for them to address, which they've had all season. But for me, I'm very confident that Grimsby will tick off the points that's required. I just think it's a bit of an edgy time, and fans are naturally a little bit nervy. But I'm very confident they've got what they need to tick off the points.
Yeah, I would have to say the ones that are flirting just above in the kind of squeaky bum position. I carry a lot more concern about Colchester and Doncaster personally than I do Grimsby Town. I think Danny Rose has been particularly brilliant this season. I think Abu Issa, the moments are so good from him. There are moments, which has always been a big problem for him. But I'll tell you what, when he's fully on it off that left hand side, he really is sensational to have in that team. I've always been a massive fan of Harry Clifton and Gavin Holohan, and curious how the new faces have come in quite quick. Curtis Thompson playing in midfield, Liv Smith, I believe, coming into right back playing his part as well. Mayor Rogers as a backline. I really like this team at the start of the season, and I'm not quite sure what's happened to him. I think I agree with you. It's just kind of a bit of a stylistic switch over to David Artell that hasn't been fully implemented yet, and it's leaving things a little bit awkward for them. But I would carry a lot more concern for this back third of the season with other sides compared to Grimsby.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page with that one, and I think in terms of those wide triangle combinations, I think they're a lot better than that than they were under the previous regime, and I think that'll start to come to fruition. But I can understand why fans are getting a bit edgy, because that's part of being a fan, isn't it? Well, we might as well bring in our next guest now, Dan from Gandermonium, here 3 minutes early. Nice to have an eager beaver on the EFL Debate podcast. Good evening, Dan. How are you?
Evening, mate. How you doing? All right, Edward.
Normally you'd be dreading coming on this podcast, but a little bit of encouragement on recent performances.
Yeah, I mean, the performances have definitely got better, both under Jason, to be fair, when he was doing the interim job, and also Steve, since he come in, has largely carried that over. I don't think it's going to be enough. We just can't seem to get that win. Funnily enough, I tweeted it after the Doncaster game. The squad just can't get out of their own way sometimes. And, there's always hope. As a football fan, you always have that, it's the hope that kills you and all that stuff.
Sure.
But, yeah, you're watching it and you're going, where's the win coming? People have been saying for weeks, we get one win, we'll get 2 or 3. But, yeah, but you've got to get that win.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably gone now. But we'll see. There's still 14 games to go. I really wish they wouldn't leave it so late, and I wish they'd get the fingers out.
Yeah. Dan, the really big frustration I've got with Sutton is I can't work out your best 11. And I wonder if Steve Morison can do the same, because you seem to chop and change so much, particularly in forward areas. I know that Bouzanis is in goal and Kitsy's at the back, and that's about it at the minute. It seems that Adam Malaki, your Millwall loanee, has played everywhere up the left at the minute. Coley's barely appeared. Buteman's appeared occasionally. Eastman's been in and out. I think Harry Smith only just made his start after coming back from suspension, for instance, up top. So do you get the sense that Morison hasn't quite worked out the best personnel yet?
I don't know whether he's. It's because he does keep his cards very close to his chest. So I mean, like people like Craig Clay and Christian Ngessen just haven't been around for the last couple of weeks, so we don't even know if they're injured or not, or if he just doesn't fancy them. So it is difficult to tell. I suppose you could look at it that because there's games still coming thick and fast, that he is mixing it up a bit. A few of us were quite surprised not to see. Is it Duke McKenna, the lad from QPR? We were quite surprised not to see him start on Tuesday night. So I don't know. I'd have to genuinely say I don't know.
Yeah, there's been a lot more of Sanderson and Dion Moore than I was probably expecting at this stage compared to what I thought was there.
To be honest, Dion Moore, I mean, that was his first start on Tuesday, and he'd only really had a couple of little flashes off the bench, like a couple of minutes. So, which I think is kind of more what we expected from him. Sanderson, same. I'm not sure what he sees in him. He's young, he's eager, he puts his effort in. He can't fault the effort, but I don't think he's quite up to the standard. Or to be fair to him, he's a young man still, got his career ahead of him. You're throwing him into a League Two battle with a side that's, won 4 games all season. It's never going to be easy. I think you could answer that question either way, yes or no.
Yeah. I kind of wonder, I go back to last summer when the retain list come out, and I think it was always known you were going to lose people like Donovan Wilson, like Omar Begiel, like Will Randolph-Linson, who'd been so wonderful to you. Josh Neufeld, of course, was only a loanee. He was only ever going to temporary stay, and he's obviously gone to SC Wimbledon. And I do remember looking at that retain list at the time and thinking, that's quite a lot out of that front line. And I wonder if there was a bit more hesitancy at the time. Maybe do we look back now and think, actually, we lost the core of what was a really good side in forward areas?
You could do. I mean, Randall, from what I've been told, Randall was approached in January, and it seems like that he was on his way anyway. We didn't want to lose him because obviously we had a lot of injuries last season, so Matt didn't want to let him go. So it seems that probably made his mind up that, right, well, I've got probably, if I play okay for the rest of the season, I've probably got an offer in January at County. I think he decided to move on from Omar. He wanted to freshen it up. Looking at when all the players who did leave, there was a lot of people amongst our lot who were a bit, is that too much? But then the faces he brought in weren't, it's not like, we went shopping in purely the Isthmian League, or we went and got a load of 18-year-olds from sort of Championship and League, Premier League sides. He brought in experience, Harry Smith's a good player.
Yep.
Amari Patrick, I mean, Jesus, we keep saying, how did we manage to get that signing? So it just hasn't worked. Something broke in that squad. This year.
Do you know
something broke? I don't know what it was. It was around September, October, or even August, maybe.
I'm trying to create theories. I'm wondering if because I think for me with the team, I always want a really consistent defensive lineup, and sometimes you haven't been able to do that because of injuries and knocks. But for the last few years, it's been Milsom, Goodlith, John, and Kitsy as a back four, and it's just been perfect. I remember seeing it really good at Grand Green Lane, particularly in the first couple of League Two seasons. And it's had to break itself apart now. Ryan Jackson's come in, Sam Hart's come in, Goodlith and John, you're never quite sure if they're going to play, or Sawunmi either, if he's going to feature. So is that a frustration as well, maybe, that there just doesn't seem to be any consistency in defence at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, the defence has been a little bit up and down. I mean, whereas in previous seasons we have had issues with injuries, players coming in and out, but it wasn't every week. If Rob Milsom got injured, for example, he'd get replaced for 3-4 weeks and then he'd come back in the side. Whereas this year it's been very much week to week a lot of the time. And also, I think what we are seeing this year is a big loss with not having Craig Eastman there. The midfield this year has been diabolical. And when Matt was in charge, his midfield was hugely important to what his side did. It was almost as important as a settled back four.
Alistair Smith box to box and Eastman almost holding in. It worked great,
You had Ali Smith there who could, I'm stunned he's come back to League Two and no offence to Colchester, joined a side in as trouble as they are. But he could do everything, box to box, could get you with the odd goals, but he could pick a pass and he was good at robbing ball as well. Him next to a guy like Eastman is perfect. And then we generally had wingers who could, had a bit of pace or could do something. We've not had that this year. Eastman's been missing most of the season. I'll be brutally honest, Craig Clay hasn't got anywhere near what we expected. And Gesson was a bit of a gamble. I generally like him, but he's the sort of player you really need next to an Eastman to get him through the odd games because he's going to jump up. He's not going to have that consistency in his first season. So we've been throwing them in together. That hasn't worked. And the wide players have just given us nothing all year. I mean, Josh Coley has just been... we were talking about this the other night. We were saying, is he even a winger? He's just given us nothing all season. And Amari has clearly had a falling out and isn't happy, which is why, because he got dropped, because he wouldn't do the defensive work. And that midfield being that much of a mess, that then has put extra weight on a defence that was being chopped and changed a bit because of circumstance, and it's shown. There was some games early in the season where we'd lose by 3 or 4, but you're stood watching it and you're going, if these guys have a go at us, they could get 6 or 7 here. and that's exactly what happened at Stockport.
Ed, I don't want to underestimate by any means how difficult it must be for Sutton United to sustain themselves in League Two and as a football league club because of the financial disparity, and there's obviously a lot of challenges. I also feel though that clubs that have a bit of success and achieve against the odds, in order to try and sustain that, I think what clubs need to do is have a recruitment policy or strategy that allows them to pick the players that are sort of a bit younger and not quite as good in terms of current ability as what they've got in the first 11, but are not far off that stylistically, so that if you're without your best player, whether they get injured, whether they get poached, you've got someone who there might be a slight drop off in quality, but it's not as if the whole operation burns down.
They can step in and do a job.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like there's some systematic continuity. And I wanted to come to Ed on this because that, for me, distinguishes the clubs that can sustain success against the odds and maybe the clubs that have a bit of a drop-off, which is what we're seeing with Sutton United.
And I would have to say that kind of goes back to my point with the retain list, where it kind of feels like you weren't able to get those people in to eventually be successors to Big Eel and Wilson, for instance. They had to go in and instantly be it. And maybe Harry Smith's one of the more experienced ones, but some of the other young lads across side, the ones on the tip of my tongue that I can't quite remember the names of, but just too little. Yeah, Josh Coley is one that really stands out to me. I was really disappointed of him. I thought we were going to look at basically going from Randall and Northfield to Patrick and Coley. Not happened. It's such a shame, really. Not clicked at all. And I completely agree with you, Dan, that Eastman being out for the period he has had a big impact. If anyone wasn't aware of exactly what Craig Eastman brings to this team in all his years here, they really have seen it this season.
Yeah, I mean, Ali was a big loss, but not having Eastie there to kind of keeps us together, just keeps the side driving on. And yeah, I mean, the problem is as well this year, we made the signings we did, but in previous seasons when we've had, going back to what Gab was saying, when we have had gaps, we've always had someone who could step in. Like the first season, we had Enzio, who we signed as a winger, but
was playing right back on times, wasn't he?
He ended up playing as an emergency fullback because he had played there when he was younger. But he did the job. He didn't complain, didn't moan, just went in, did the job. Was he a brilliant fullback? No. But was he not, in replacing sort of someone like Rob Milson, was he, 90% of that? Yeah. But, I mean, players like that. I mean, when you lose Kizzy coming off the right and him having to play centre-back, you have to then do it the other side. So and that's what another thing of sort of losing people like it's just those guys who are good pros and they can play 2 or 3 positions and they could just fill in when you needed them to. And we've had that for 2 years. This year, it's just
Milsom's declined as well. I think I'm not sure whether he's had.
He's in his late 30s now. It's not really surprising.
That's 37 now.
Point, Ed. So it's like you've kind of got to anticipate that.
Well, I was hoping Sam Hart would beat that because I do really like Sam Hart. Even though he's part of an Oldham team that got relegated, I was still quite keen on him as a really dynamic fullback. I don't know. Is it just not clicked for him right, Dan? Whether it's been left, mid, or forwards.
He signed last year, and this year's kind of his longest. We barely saw him. This year is the only time he's really got any kind of game time. I'd probably say he's more a wing, more someone you want to play in a 3-5-2 rather than having as an out-and-out left back. Because even when, I mean, clearly sides have had a go at Rob early season because of his age. Hit the old boy in the left back position and just see. And most of our trouble has been the left side. But even when Sam was there, you didn't really see any appreciable difference. They were still, pulling him out and pinging balls in behind him. And, the amount of times we conceded for a ball in behind the left back and a ball across and a tap in, like the goal we conceded at Morecambe, we must have conceded 10, 12 of those this year.
And this is the problem now where your alternative to those two is Sasha Ladon-Malaki, who is 19, making his first steps in EFL football.
He's looked all right, to be fair to him. He's not been at least we've not got worse in that position. It's there's been just so many little things that either we've got wrong, done wrong, or it's just not gone our way this year. And we're not, as going back to what Gab says about sort of funding and stuff, if we make a mistake with recruitment, it's very difficult for us to, we can't do like Gillingham did last year, where they got the takeover and they could replace basically the side in January.
Or even down Forest Green, like they've been able to compensate for a bad summer by recruiting another, having another full window in January, which Sutton can't afford to do. So Steve Morison then, Dan, bit of some encouragement in terms of performances, maybe not from what you're saying in terms of staying up this season. So I'll ask you a different question to whether you think Sutton will stay up, because I think you've sort of answered that. Do you see do you see Steve Morison leading?
You might say yes, give him the chance to answer. He could have some
You're asking
optimism and come out and saying we're going to win 3 in a row now and get ourselves back up to Colchester.
You're asking the wrong man there, Ed, I'm telling you.
Do you think Steve Morison will lead Sutton United into the National League next season?
I don't think he's going to have left Hornchurch for this. Just to keep us up and we'll see how you do type thing. I think he'll have signed it. I don't know for sure, but I think he'll have signed at least an 18-month deal. So unless we're a total disaster in the last 14 games, and he can show that, get something, even if he can get a couple of wins between now and the end of the season. And I think there's enough there. I mean, we got a draw at Mansfield. We drew at home with Barrow, should have beat them. I mean, we were more than competitive against Wrexham on Tuesday night, but again,
both games against Wrexham, actually, when you think about it.
Well, it was just, again, we had probably a couple of crap moments, and that's really cost us. And they've had also the personnel to go up that gear if they really needed to, which they did. So there's been promise there. When we've played, we haven't, barring Stockport, we've not been slaughtered. Been completely outclassed by a lot of the top sides. We've kind of raised it. So I think with his own squad, will be solid next year. I'd like to see him recruit his team and just see what he does with it. But I think he'll be in charge next season. As we saw with Matt, we really don't move on from managers very quickly. That's the one thing you do get with us is time, is patience. Even with Matt, and you take out of sort of all the credit he had when we did let him go, he had a crappy spell when he first started with us, and the club were like, "It's fine, we know what you're trying. We can see what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
just it needs to happen." So I think Steve will be there next season.
What would be expectations for Sutton in the National League next year? Because I feel like you are a very grounded fan base generally. Where the club has been before, not too long ago, actually, lower than even the National League level and more playing as a part-time side. So would there be a breaking point for Steve Morison, for instance, as if to say, it's just not going to happen? If you were, for instance, say, just middle of the pack next year in a competitive National League division, would that be seen as disappointing, obviously, because you want an immediate return, but would it be probably seen as sufficient?
I think it will go, there'll be a split there, because there will obviously be the guys, older heads like me, who are like, look, it's gone, let's just stabilise next year, just be competitive. And if we were to finish, say, 12th, 13th in the National League next year, I myself wouldn't be overly distraught over that. It's, as long as you're not getting it swinging from being thrashed one week to winning next, things like that, where you can't see.
Do you know what? I think it depends a lot more. Sometimes we can talk about sort of league positions, but I think the big thing is, are you developing players? Can you see what you're building? That's the big thing. I think the difference between finishing, I don't know, 10th and 15th, for example, is actually more about, are you developing players that you can build you can move forward with?
Being a full-time team in non-league for the first time in, ever, I think.
Well, I mean, that won't last long because obviously you only get the parachute for 2 years, so I don't know how long that will go for. But I think it'll be a split. I think the older heads like me won't be gutted if we say finished 10th and didn't really trouble the playoffs or anything like that. But then also there's the younger, more sort of the newer fan base that we have picked up, and this isn't having a go at them. They've seen the club go up, so they now If we go down, they're going to want an instant bounce.
That problem,
back.
isn't it? Those 2 years, that promotion year, and then the third debut EFL year. For anyone who's just been introduced to something in that moment, you've kind of been tricked into thinking that's what it's like all the time. That you get to Wembley and
anyone who's been watching us in the last 9-10 years will. It's been
Birmingham City. My team, Birmingham City, finished 10th in the Premier League in my first year having a season ticket. So that definitely set expectations unfavourably. Dan, thanks so much for talking to us.
Anytime.
Time for Sutton right now, but I think a little bit of encouragement and hope.
I'll go back to battering Hartlepool home and away next season. That's what they always seem to do.
Nice one. Thanks a lot, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, lads. Have a good evening.
Top man. And get following Gandermonium, of course, on Twitter. Had a question, got a lot of comments in. Let me get to the question.
You don't get these in League One, and people more eager in League Two. Is that what it is?
I know, maybe that's what it is. Josh asked, are you going to be talking about Doncaster?
Does he want us to talk about Doncaster?
Let's talk about Doncaster. Do you know what? I really like how Doncaster fans have rallied behind Grant McCann, and I know that they'll probably say that it is because of the ownership, and they don't want maybe the underperformance on the pitch to sort of become a scapegoat for the deeper issues of the club. But I also admire the principle of that, and I think there's some fan bases that would, considering Grant McCann is the face of the club, maybe vent at him a little bit more than the Doncaster fans are doing. But I do admire their patience, and hopefully that's going to be rewarded.
Yeah, Doncaster, similar frustration for me that I find with Sutton, where I just can't work out the team. And I think it doesn't help with an injury list, which has affected them quite a lot. And Grant McCann having to adapt. Essentially, he's been very dependent on Joe Ironside this season, leading the line, which is not surprising. I think Joe Ironside's an excellent striker. Demonstrated in his promotion team with Cambridge primarily, where he probably went under the radar because of what Mullin was doing alongside him. But he was a really good physical centre forward, really good spring, and I've always been really impressed by that. The supporting cast around him has had to vary so much. I think Luke Mullin, who's a fantastic winger to have on the right-hand side, but we'll not be able to see a regular spell of him. Tommy Rowe's been here and there all over the place. I do like Odin Bailey, who's gone in defence at times and midfield at times, but this is a team that sometimes play a 3-5-2 and then sometimes play a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2 or something, and there's just no consistency. Again, with the Sutton situation I'm going back to, there's no real consistency enough in defence and midfield, those areas you want that consistently with personnel. And it's part of the reason I maybe have to attribute to them struggling this year. They just really struggle to put a consistent 11 out, and it's frustrating to watch.
Yeah, I think there's only been 4 games this season where Grant McCann has been able to start Richard Wood with the experience and know-how that he brings with one of Zane Westbrook and Ben Close, and I do think that makes a difference. If he'd been able to have that more often, I do think they might be in a different position.
Jamie Sterry's one again. I absolutely adored. I love Jamie Sterry. I have for ages. I thought he was fantastic at Hartlepool. The problem with Sterry, match fitness is such an issue. You just can't trust a spell against him. It's a bit like Southern Hales at Stockport. Wonderful attacking fullback. Really good asset to have, but Tom Nixon probably gets game time ahead of him because Sterry just sadly cannot be trusted with his fitness, and it's a real shame because that was my standout signing for Doncaster action this summer. I really, really like Jamie Sterry.
I loved him at Hartlepool. That partnership with Lewis Cass down the right-hand side was so good under Dave Challoner, wasn't it? So, so again, that's another thing that Grant McCann will be frustrated about. And hopefully, if he can have a bit more luck with injuries, he can... have an improved fortunes. Are you confident Doncaster are going to tick off the points they need? They've got 32 points already. I think that's 9 points more than Forest Green have got.
This goes back to the discussion about whether you think those two below are going to get their act together and get caught. I still feel like a Doncaster feel like one of the catchable ones because I just can't quite trust them. They picked up a little bit more, but I'm also worried that this is a team that, for instance, shipped 5 to Morecambe last year at home. It's something that worries me about them, where it feels like they're going to have a uncomfortable final third this season. Even if they do find themselves a little bit just above the pack, it's going to stay squeaky for them. And sadly, I think till the season comes to a close.
Yeah, I think Josh Horseman has said ultimately recruitment hasn't been great over a number of years, and you can't blame McCann for that. I mean, it's funny because I think I was talking quite positive. Maybe it's because it was right at the start of the summer that Doncaster were the ones that were recruiting quite early, and I was sort of it almost made me focus more on Doncaster and maybe put a more favourable light on their recruitment, or again the injuries have affected things. I don't know whether there's a sports science issue there that they can possibly address, but a lot of issues. I hope they get a takeover at some point, because they definitely need fundamental change at that club. And then I suppose we ought to mention Colchester United, Ed.
Yes.
They've appointed Danny Cowley. I think there was someone who's saying eagle-eyed use. Let me find the comment. I think we'd be in serious trouble if we didn't get the Cowleys. Not only have performances have improved, but I don't think we would have attracted the likes of Ali Smith and Harry Anderson without them.
Yep. Similar thing to them I had when Cole Robinson rocked up at Salford. Really high caliber managers. Really great to see the Cowleys actually back in a county where it all began for them all that time ago. At Braintree, Ali Smith is the one that highlights to me when I went to that Colchester game. That driving run he brings from midfield, I mean, Gandermonium pointed out there perfectly. That's a really valuable asset to have. Harrison's been very good at the left-hand side. It's a really good mix-in with Tom Hopper leading the line. Jaden Thebria, one of the emergent stars this year, playing off the right-hand side. Chilvers is mainly the main point in conversation, because I had this guy down as potentially being one of the stars of the season in the entire division, and he seems to have regressed this year, gone back from where he was before. And that is probably one of the big real shames to me, because apart from that, Riley Harbottle and Connor Hall's a centre-back partnership, very fine. Ellis Yandolo. Goodman's had a bit rough recently, but generally over the season, I think he has been good. I'm not going to hold him down for a couple of mistakes in recent games. Jaden Richardson, the right back, just doing fine. The big disappointment to me is Chilvers. I really, really love this guy the last couple of years.
We were talking about him as one of Colchester's big assets.
Yeah, he felt like the next big star to come out of their system, and it's not the same. I mean, I was at the Colchester. They celebrated him being subbed off at the Colchester Forest Green game, Gab. Maybe that's a bit of an over-the-top emotional reaction at the moment, but it was a reflection of really he's not hit the heights of being the star. This is a guy who was the top scorer for them last year, a really good attacking midfielder, and now I'd probably say he's behind the pecking order in terms of influence, behind certainly Cameron McGee and probably Arthur Reed and Ali Smith as well at the moment.
For context, Eagle-Eyed Use has said, credit where it's due, Chilvers had one of his best games at Harrogate in the central midfield role over Reed, but yes, he's been far too inconsistent. And then Josh Horseman on Doncaster Rovers ownership has said, not finding anyone richer than Terry Bramall, needs the right people around him to spend his money. I'm still pretty confident that the teams just above the relegation zone are going to get the points they need. So unless Forest Green put together an incredible winning streak, which I'm not quite sure that they're ready to do just yet, for me, it's Sutton and Forest Green finishing in the bottom two. What do you reckon, Ed?
It's very easy to say that, but it's hard to argue with it. Yeah. The one is probably Forest Green at the moment, isn't it? If it's you can let your recency bias get away, because I think if this happened a week ago, I would have completely said no chance to either of them, especially off the back of their battering at the hands of Mansfield. But that's a really, really impressive win away at Barrow, and the way they've invested in that squad, to use the cliche, they do it a little bit too good to go down. They've just made, I think, so many errors with recruitment, particularly in managers in the last couple of years, that has taken them away from being. It's probably going to lead to them incredibly having a case where they've gone up to League One and then gone back-to-back relegations immediately afterwards. And it's what you'd observe really for a basket-case club in financial peril, and Forest Green aren't that. So it's going to be a bit of a head-scratcher to neutral observers if they see this at the end of the season.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks to Jack Jones for his comment on Tranmere Rovers. He thinks they'll be okay, and hopefully at better times next season with a new chairman at the helm. And then Josh Horseman has mentioned Agib Delican looking a key signing in January. He's Joe, I'm pleased for Delican actually, because he's had a few, when he came through at Scunthorpe in the sort of mid to late 2010s and he was this exciting raw prospect. He went to Bristol City and it felt like he's never really kicked on from that. And he's had a few years where he's been sort of a little bit in the wilderness. I suppose he felt like
a bit of a repeated conversation with Delican where I was saying the first thing people mentioned was his pace, and that's about it.
Yeah. It's like, because that's the thing. I think it's one thing for an 18-year-old to say he's quick, But then I think once you get to your mid-20s, you've got to have he's quick and I feel like Adeleke hasn't quite added that just yet. But hopefully Doncaster's the right place for him to rebuild his career. Busy night on the comments tonight, so thanks to everyone who's chipped in. I'd love you to get involved next week and beyond as we get towards, I think, the run-in, you'd call it.
I think we're a little way off.
It's
a debate, actually. It could be something for the last 10 minutes, isn't it? When does
the last third of the season, should we call it?
I would almost say last 10. Running for me is kind of like what you'd call the last 10 metres at 100, I'd almost say. Well, a little different than that. It's such a quick rate, but like the final mile in a marathon, for instance.
The final mile?
Maybe call final mile in a marathon, maybe something like that.
Okay.
I don't know. I think 15's still a little bit too big for me. It's still a third of the season left. We're in February. I wouldn't start talking about running until we hit sort of late March time. Well, maybe mid-March because we end in April this season.
Sorry, I was interrupting you there. I'd go with the last third of the series. Perhaps
it's a topic of debate if you want to have it that way.
Because it feels like it is a significant time because we are getting. It does feel like we're getting to the point where you can be a bit less process driven because the results themselves feel more significant. But yeah, it's maybe not. Maybe the running was the wrong word. Anyway, we're getting towards there.
I wouldn't say there's enough beach teams yet to say we're in the running yet, especially with the madness of this division where I think there's 2 points between 7th and 12th at the moment. And obviously you've got the ridiculous automatic race and Mansfield and Stockport now battling for a title and all this going on. And Mansfield scoring 9 goals and not getting 10. And I'm still not over that. They should have got 10. I'm really, really disappointed in them. And I will let Mansfield fans know that. Should have got 10.
I think Crawley, Walsall, Swindon and I'd say Tranmere are on the beach, but Jack Jones seems to think they've got a bit of work to.
Swindon's the one maybe to discuss, Gab, because this situation away from the field still leaves me a little bit on edge about
Not in terms of this season, surely. They've got 39 points, mate.
Is there the promise of no kind of... I don't know if there was rumours of potential sanctions at some point. I don't know if that's potentially gone away now.
I don't know. I don't quite know. If let's for now assume there's no sanctions, in which case,
if we're talking that, yes, fine, 39. I agree with that. But it's also a bit of... I was very worried about them in January, for instance, after they lost Young and Kemp and saw Hutton go and saw Kinsella leave as well. But maybe things okay if we get a resurgence of Harry McCurdy, for instance, to go with Charlie Austin up top, and we get some consistency out of Hepburn, Murphy, and Devoy plays his part, then it should be fine. And we'll see what happens with Gunning in the managerial job.
I think that for point deductions, they should be announced before the season rather than in season. It's because I think in season they sort of change the goalposts, whereas before the season, I'm not sure I agree with them before at any time. But at least with before the season, you kind of know what you're getting into, and the situation doesn't sort of change drastically. So that will be my feeling on it.
Yeah, and then Crawley, I don't know if you've seen today. I've got about eight-figure losses or depth. I think they're loading about 80,000 a year. So you thought we were going to have a season without Wagme interfering and being the talking point again with Crawley Town, but nope, sadly not.
I think they could be in trouble next season. Right. Well, that just about concludes it. Thanks to everyone for watching at home, especially to those who've got involved and commented. So thank you very much for that. Thanks to my co-host Ed for stepping in at late notice. Thanks to both our guests. This has been the EFL Debate League 2 podcast. Join us next week.